Brian S. Red, and of course, our friend from Temecula, Jay.
How are you?
So, we had gotten quite a few inquiries and interest that people really enjoy some of our stories about the early days. And, tell us more about the club days and how you got into this. And then, Brian made a great suggestion, like, why don't we just tell them, how we got into it, the early days of our career. So, Brian, I'll let you take the first go.
Well, I don't know where you want me to go with this specifically. Do you want me to talk about how I
how did you
got in the booth in the first place, or do you want me to talk about? Okay.
How'd you get into music and into the booth?
Well, into music is a totally another conversation, but
I go with becoming a DJ. The transformation of I'm Brian who loves music. The next day, I'm Brian a DJ.
Good idea.
Oh, well, that's an easy one. So going back as far as I can remember, I mean, kid of the 70s, my mom would go to the disco with her friends and things, and that was just fascinating to me. Whenever I would see anything with the flashing lights and the dancing, I just thought that was so cool. That was like, the coolest thing about being an adult.
I did. My first thought is like, what's he doing in a club? And then
what's he doing?
Driving, smoking, and drinking.
No, I mean you're seeing it on TV. You're seeing it on Midnight Special or the movie Saturday Night Fever, or in the anytime there would be something on TV where it would be disco because it was a thing. You'd see the lights and the action, and I don't know. I just thought that was the coolest thing an adult could possibly do, like a young adult.
Yeah.
You got old people, you got kids, and you got people who go to discos. That's how I saw it. And all the cool people would go to the discos.
We met girls.
The closest thing I could get to disco was a skating rink because it had lights and it had a DJ. So I would do that. And that was my social thing. Oh man, probably from the time I was about 8 years old. I was going, and I wasn't very good at skating, but I got good at it. It was less about the skating and more about the music and the atmosphere and the sound and just the social environment for me, because it was, what we had available to us as kids. So when I was 13, I was going to this relatively new skating rink quite a bit. And there was a family who owned it. And the wife would go to the Columbia House, record and tape club to order the music for
11 cents.
The skating rink.
And never paid the rest.
Never paid the rest off. Yeah.
Right. 11 records for a penny. And you only got to buy one record at $50 in the next, 2 years or whatever. So anyway, I would go to the skate rental counter and help her pick out the best records because she didn't know. So it was just something to do, I'd go there. I'll talk to Jackie Juris and help her. Oh yeah, get this one, get that one. Oh no, don't get that one. It's only got one good song. This has got a lot of good songs on it. So
how old are you at this point?
13.
Okay.
So
wow.
So she would just buy the stuff I would tell her to buy, and it would always work. And there would be a lot of good songs on them because you want bang for your buck with that.
Mm-hmm.
And then so one day I was in line to go skating, and I always would go after school on Fridays. So I would walk from school to the skating rink in this little town I lived in and just wait for the doors to open. They didn't open until like 5, but I'd sit there and wait because there's nothing else to do. So I was always first in line, and she poked her head out of the little window and said, "Hey, the DJ isn't going to be here tonight. You need to do it." So well, I don't know how to do it. She says, "Well, my daughter will show you. Just come on in. And if you do this for us and you clean the bathrooms before and after, I'll pay you minimum wage, and you're free to skate whenever you want. And the concessions is just like your refrigerator. Get whatever you want out of there." So
it's like an ABC after school special, isn't it? Or is it just me?
So I go in there, and her 10-year-old daughter takes me into the booth and says, "Okay, this is the mixing board. This is the crossfader. And these are the volumes for it. Here's the record players. Here's the records. all these switches over here for the lights. Have fun. So that's how it started. And the first record I dropped, I remember, was Joe Walsh, The Confessor. It was the first song I ever dropped. And it was a relatively new song at the time. So that's how I got into it. And the reason I kept doing it is because it's two reasons. It's the only thing anyone really asked me to do when it came to work. And the only thing anybody thanked me for doing. I didn't get appreciation for working at the drugstore or shoveling crap at the horse barn or vacuuming as a janitor. None of those things ever got a thank you. But DJing, not only did they ask me to do it, but they thanked me for doing it. I to this day, as Jay is my witness, to this day, I have never looked for a job as a DJ. It's always come to me. And that's been happening since I was 13 years old.
I can say the same thing. I didn't look for it. I'll go before Jay because we know he's going to go on a fork in the road.
Mine won't be too bad.
No,
but
might be shorter than mine.
Well, I was, gosh, I think I must have been 8 years old when my uncle moved to New Jersey to look for work because, it was a dead town in Scranton.
It was the Great Depression, Howie. Nobody should be ashamed of the fact that people were moving. The wagons had to leave the West and go east.
It was the 20s. You're right. You're correct.
Don't be ashamed of that, Howie.
30s.
But he came and
so
we had to double up as kids in the bedroom, and he got his own room. But what he would do is he made money on the side in bars playing country music with an acoustic guitar.
Oh.
And we could hear him playing. I'd knock on the door and I, come on in. And I would sit there and I was fascinated with the guitar playing and the way he could sing. And I was like, wow. Then I got an 8-transistor radio for Christmas one year. And all my allowance went to batteries to keep this thing under my pillow, kind of like reading comic books, with the covers, so you don't get caught by your parents.
Did you have the one ear thing?
Just the one ear.
Yeah. With the cord, yes. I had that too.
Yeah. And it was enough that I could listen to, well, in New York, it was like the Casey Kasem version of the Top 40 by Cousin Brucey.
Cousin Brucey, yeah.
This is Cousin Brucey. And he'd do the, the Top 40 countdown. And I was just fascinated. And I heard that song, I can't remember the title.
Beethoven's Ninth Movement?
No, not that one. No toilet stuff. It was Downtown.
How much is that doggy in the window?
Oh, yeah, Downtown.
Downtown.
That's a good song.
Things will be brighter when you're downtown. And I had this vision in my head. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Oh, that's what I want to do. I want to be a musician. So I took lessons and I became a drummer, and as an early teen played in different bands, church basements, the whole 9 yards. And I got a little older and I went to New York, and this is kind of parallel to what happened to you, Jay, out in LA. And I went to New York and I said, I'm going to be a star.
Yeah.
And then there's kids younger than me that were just doing ramadiddles, paradiddles, tripadiddles. I'm like, I was like,
yeah,
whoa, I better switch gears. So I did. And I went into lighting and sound and production because I had a background in theater. And I did that for a long time, and I actually had a multi-op where I rented out. I had 8 different lighting and sound systems that I could rent out for $200 a week. Bands were starting and breaking up all the time, but they would get a gig at a club and they needed a system. So they were willing to pay that money, $200 for the whole week, and work maybe 4 nights a week for $300. To them, it was a deal. To me, it was a cash cow renting out all these systems.
Right.
One night, after a few years of that, there was this Wednesday night where the owner of the club that I was the house light and sound guy at said, yeah, we're only going to have one band. They used to have 3 bands. One band would go off, there'd be another band start, in different stages. And he said, yeah, things aren't so good. We're going to only have one band. We need someone to play music in between. So that's what I did. And I used my actual analog mixing board for sound. And I had 2 cassette decks. And I would just fade in and out, no real mixing. And then a few weeks later, he's like, we're not having bands on Wednesday anymore. Can you play music all night and do lighting? And I'll give you $500. And I was like, $500 back then, in the late 30s, that was a lot of money,
I bought a house every week.
Yeah, right. So I was like, I didn't, I acted cool. I was like, yeah, I could do that. And I'm thinking in my head, I don't have to split this with 4 other guys, so this is cool. And that's when I morphed into DJing. And now I've come full circle where I do, very few events now as a DJ, because of my age and my health. But I'm back into the production part of it where I'll be going for 2 weeks, kind of like what Brian did, doing the tech work and, production and tech work. I'll actually be building, the lighting design and operating it. And so here I've come full circle, but I'm still in the music business. So
that's awesome.
All right, Jay.
I genuinely won't go long on the kind of genesis of music, but much like the two of you, and we've talked about this on the shows before, the playing the parents' albums. And when I was 6, I got this little red AM radio. Back in 1970, AM radio was what FM radio became.
Right.
So in AM, and in Boston, it was WRKO. And the DJ there was this guy named Dale Dorman. He passed away a number of years ago, but he was one of those early DJs in Boston who was playing, you could hear Layla and Aretha Franklin and some local band and this and this. So music was always there. Then I think about 4th grade, I started playing the trumpet, played that into high school. And, as Brian and I have talked about, not having older brothers and sisters, I kind of hit that wall of how to be exposed to music. So a good friend of mine in high school, Rip, had an older brother. So he kind of fed us, Aerosmith and Allman Brothers and all that. And Rip got a Sears Silvertone guitar for Christmas.
Oh, I remember those.
And I just remember being so fascinated and I had to have a guitar. And the next Christmas, I got a red Wurlitzer. My mom had gotten a Winston acoustic. Like, it seems like 70s guitars were all named after cigarette companies. But we had this Winston acoustic guitar with, if you ever played guitar, action is the distance between the string and the fretboard. And on cheap guitars, it's like that. On a good guitar, it's like that.
Yes.
And, I would mess with this little thing in the house, but it never really became a thing. And then once I got to high school, that was it. I was locked and loaded, and I still play. And that's where I thought my career was going. Fast forward probably 20 years working in clubs. I never was a DJ driven guy like you guys. I never was in the dance scene. So I didn't know the names. When I worked in a nightclub in San Diego, as a bartender, but the DJ booth fascinated me. And I would go in there because they would play all this different music, and I would talk to the DJs. And I kept watching what they did. I'm like, what's that do? And they had a Rane MP44 mixer and a Denon 2000 Mark III dual CD player. And they were constantly on the mic. It wasn't a dance club. It was a club with dancers. If you can't figure that one out, good luck. So they were constantly flipping CDs in and out. And one Saturday, the DJ didn't show up. And I was bartending the opening shift. And the manager goes, hey, where's the DJ? I go, I don't know. Do you want me to turn the booth on? Do you know how? I said, yeah, I've hung out there like off shift and watched these guys work. It's really cool. He goes, go ahead, set it up. And luckily the DJ had left his music there. So he had, remember the, was it Case Logic that had the soft, like 30 or 60 CD cases that you'd zip around and open?
I still have some.
I do too, in the garage. He had 4 of those. And I DJ'd the shift and bartended because it was dead. So I could put a song on and be like, hey, coming up next, Cinnamon. There, that's your giveaway. Then run back to the bar and make a couple drinks. It was dead. But at the end of the night, the manager goes, do you want to pick this shift up as the DJ? I'm like, seriously? He's like, yeah. So that was the beginning. That was 1995. And I started going to swap meets every weekend in the morning. Even if I was working, because they would open at like 7, and buying used CDs as fast as I could get my hands on them. And I learned the most important lesson early on. Play to the crowd. Even though I had people telling me what they wanted to hear, I eventually grew into a good enough DJ in that environment where I would say, I have 7 guys wearing Rolling Stones t-shirts sitting around the stage. You really sure we should go with Biggie and Tupac on this one? Let me just try this. And all of a sudden, when people started making a lot of money, they gave it over to me to say, just do whatever you do. So that was the beginning of it.
In the skating rinks, I can even remember, now that you mention it, it's funny, it's thought of this. I'm thinking at the time, hey, let me play the new Wham song, or let me play the new Corey Hart song, or whatever. Ooh. And I could, but if I really wanted a response, and this is kind of full circle with UJ, it was freestyle electro. So I was doing freestylers, and I was doing Debbie Deb, and I was doing things like that, right. Trenier and Ellie Dream Team. That's how I know this stuff. That stuff got the best response. Right. That stuff got the really good skaters out, the little older than me who were fantastic at what they did and would do their pack jams and stuff around the floor. Yeah. But if I just played whatever, the kids who happened to be there skating with their parents might come out. But if I really wanted to get them excited, I played this other thing.
Well, yeah, and that's the essence.
Breaking in those songs, basically.
Do what?
Were you breaking those songs that you're talking about?
Those were staples in that community. So okay. I didn't know it at the time. I learned it a little later on. That those were also staples in the Latin community. So they were big in the skating rinks, but they were also huge in the Latin community in general for clubbing or whatever. But at the time, I didn't know that. At the time, that stuff you didn't hear on the radio. That was underground stuff, but it was huge, in the club scene.
Well, and I think that's where we all have that similarity, and it changes the dynamics very quickly. I talk to guys like, yeah, my friend was a DJ and I went to a wedding with him and a party and I became a DJ. I'm like, oh, cool. So you got that environment, whereas we would bring DJs into the club all the time that would say, yeah, I want to work here because this is a cool environment. You make a lot of money. And what they never could grasp, the two things they couldn't get was you play to the crowd exclusively, but more importantly, you had to talk a lot.
It was more of an MC gig. I mean, and it
really was. It was a lot of MC, but where the money got made was when you got creative. When you would say to somebody, I'm going to play Typo Negative, love you to death, but I'm going to jump on stage and move the 4 par cans that are over the booth. I'm going to point 2 of them out, 2 of them straight, put a red gel on them. You come out and put your hands out like this. I'll fog the stage. I'll bring you out and hit the thing. And you'd see everyone's mouth drop. And all of a sudden, at the end of the 2 songs, you'd get $100 bill tip. Well, you're on an 8-hour shift. So the money was on a good night ridiculous.
Yeah.
But it allowed you to become creative. The other thing it allowed for me to learn was I knew my lane. I knew my metal. I knew my poppy stuff. I'm the first to admit I wasn't the dance like you guys did. I envy the knowledge you have of the old dance stuff. That wasn't the genre for me. I was from the rock side.
Yeah.
So I suddenly had people coming in and they would bring their music. The only downside was I had to either buy it or borrow it. There was no place to go for it. So I'd sit there and be like, oh, this is awesome. Who's Reverend Horton? I had one girl, Reverend Horton Heat was her.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, who's Reverend Horton Heat? You know? What happened?
That's awesome.
I know that, you were mentioning the guitar thing. I wanted to play guitar badly. Like that's what I wanted to do. And I did, through my 20s, I played something.
Right.
And it was rock that I was interested in. And, now that I look back on it, and we mentioned the older sibling thing, my brother was into rock. And in my mind, I'm thinking if I want to be cool like my brother, I'm going to be into rock, But the truth is, like my first favorite song was probably Who Loves You by Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons. And Rock the Boat by Hughes Corporations or Blackbirds Walking in Rhythm. I always gravitated towards R&B and soul music and disco music. That was what I loved. I liked the other stuff too.
Right.
If okay, you want to listen to an Ozzy song or you want to listen to a Bee Gees song? I mean, I might go Bee Gees. I mean, that's just
no, and I totally get that.
So I did it all.
What I find even today, I love when bands or songs or artists, I love bridges that are great. Like Billy Joel is one of the best bridge writers on the planet. But I love melody. I love when songs don't go dun 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 when they go different. When it like the Police always intrigued me because their melodies were off, their timing was off, but it was kind of like collective chaos. Like they knew what they were doing.
Yeah,
it's like whoa. Anytime your ears perk up and go, oh, that didn't sound right. What was that? Wait, rewind. Oh, yeah. I like that.
There are a lot of neat songs like that.
And that's why when I got into dance music, initially I was like, oh, this is great. They're changing this. They're doing this. Like I got really into trance before I got into house because trance, even though it's consistent, would have these weird ups and downs and breaks.
Right.
But I wasn't in that situation. Like only a few months after I left that job, which I did for 2 years as a DJ and then became the director of entertainment for the yacht company, where I was DJing 5 nights a week and at least 1 gig on the weekend. So week after week after week, it was part of my salary that I would DJ these 6 to 10 cruises. Well, I mean, you've got a new group in front of you every night and you got to figure out, okay, what can I do? Like what songs can I rely on? That's where I learned the, Unchained Melodies and the how to mix, Unforgettable into At Last by Etta James, because they mix. But the other stuff mixing, there's still I didn't get that into it till the club people started showing up, and I'm like, oh, this is wow, DJs are doing some cool stuff. That's why if you ever watch me, I can't do a crossfader. I've never learned how to work on that crossfader.
We'll work on that.
It's always been channels, but it's always just channels.
Brian brought up a good point earlier about minimum wage, all you can eat at the snack bar, and getting in skating. I can remember my first gig was they passed the hat in the church basement, and by the time we split it all up, it was $5 for the whole night. Jay, what was your first payment?
$32.50 was what the club paid us as an independent contractor, and then it was based solely on tips. So you could have a night where you made $32.50 for 8 hours, or you could have a night where you made $500.
Oh, very
And
good.
Yeah, that's club stuff.
And in the very beginning, it was super inconsistent. And I just had to figure out how to get ahead of it. And I figured out immediately, once it all came together, I figured out, oh, if I can make them money, they'll make me money.
Right.
Oh, okay.
An epiphany.
Well, and I did, I can't tell you the countless times I would say, look, I know Biggie Hypnotize would work for you, but just look out at the crowd. Just let me do one set for you. And if I fail, I'll never do it again. And I rarely ever, because I had eyes. I was blessed with vision.
Play to the audience. Yeah.
So I could play to the audience. And it was a great environment because that audience comes and goes very, very quickly. You turn those chairs constantly. So I didn't have the regulars of a club like, oh, we're here to see Jay. He's awesome. I never had that. I had to make that new audience want to stay because then they'd spend money and it would all trickle back to who DJ'd last night. The crowd was pumping. Jay did. Oh, okay. Let's get him on the good shifts. That's how you earned shifts back in my day. If the house, and that's what's funny now when club guys I see who have their head down and it's all about mash and mix and cool effects. And I'm just like, you're supposed to kill the floor once in a while. So they go drink, right?
Right.
What do you mean? No, I want to pack dance floor all night. I'm like, just trust me. Your owner and manager don't want to pack dance floor all night. They don't even care if they dance. They care if they drink. Right. And that was the thing. They cared if they tipped the dancers and drank. So you got to make a comfortable environment. And there would be nights where I would literally say to dancers, trust me, just get on stage. Just trust me. And I would send them out because they didn't have to do much. But then they eventually would start to see where I was going and go, hey, what do you think about 9 Inch Nails? I'm like, okay, let me do this. Let me do this lighting thing. So I got to learn about sound, fog, lighting, where to mix things, when to talk, what to say, not to be too pushy. It was a great learning lesson. It really was. It really set me up for success.
When I was 18, I started doing two different things simultaneously. I started doing, when I was 17, I started doing mobile stuff. I was almost 18 though. But when I was 18, I was not only doing mobile stuff, but I ended up in nightclubs, which was weird. It was a really interesting experience. And, the agents or, people who brought me in or whatever, they would always tell me, they said, well, they never ask you how old you are. All you got to say is old enough and leave it at that.
Right.
Okay. So, I wasn't supposed to be in there, but I was in there.
Yeah.
And it was, I wasn't mature enough to figure this out without actually experiencing it first. That things that work in the club aren't going to work at the wedding reception. So I would go to the club and I get very excited about what I was doing at the club. And I always got a really good response. And there was a rotation at many of the clubs that I worked at. I demanded more than anyone else did, and I got it. I said, well, I'm not going to do it unless I make more. And they gave it to me. So I always made more than anybody else, which was really cool. But then I would never work Fridays and Saturdays because they always had me booked up for weddings. And I would have this great experience at the club with a track or something. And I couldn't wait to play it at a wedding. And it would just bomb,
Oh, you've done that too? Yeah.
Oh, geez. It was just like
how are they not picking this up? This is such a banger. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
I think that's the reason I made more money on that Wednesday is because when he said we're not having bands anymore, I said, okay, I'll be here tomorrow to take my lights and sound out. And he goes, no. Leave them there. I want you to, he was basically renting my equipment and hiring an inexperienced non-DJ just to play music. And like you said, I would play that rock and roll that they would dance to, but then I would go into country rock or what they call now yacht rock to drive them to the bar and get drinks.
Yeah, rotating the floor of the room or whatever. Yeah.
Rotating.
It's sort of like the guys that you hear about, they're going to open for someone and they're all excited to crush it. I'm like, you realize as the opener, your role is to just start the night, not crush the night.
Right.
Like you're not there to put on a show. You're there to build a crowd up so that when the headliner jumps in, they can go to town. It's like, I'm sure it's going on today somewhere in this world. There's an opener that's playing the headliner's song. And it's like the sin of sins is if you're opening for Tiesto, don't ever play a Tiesto track.
Right.
Don't think it's a compliment. It's not cool. There's just a protocol. And I think, when Brian was saying about bangers from one thing to a wedding, I would get excited like, oh man, Reverend Horton Heat, this song is killing. And go do a cruise or a wedding and be like, this would be a good time for this. And it would just be shambles. Be like, oh man, this is
how is this possible?
How are they not aware of this?
This is where I got the whole comedians versus DJs parallel because they do it with jokes all the time. Joke lands really good in Milwaukee one night. It's not necessarily going to land good in Chicago the next.
No,
true.
It's the same thing. I mean, I can relate to what they go through.
Well, I think it's a mental timing
material.
Almost. It's like, I did a gig last night and I've been doing this gig for this client for 15 years. It's a really great gig. It's a very high-end gig. It's a very high-end client, very politically connected. And this client is a former military, former U.S. attorney. I'm talking, okay, Jay, Christmas songs till 7:30, 6:30 to 7:30. 7:30 to 7:50, let's do more upbeat Christmas and some Motown. Then 7:50 to 8, let's do slow songs. Then 8 to 9:30 dance. Here's the list. Here's how long I want each song. And the reason I've been with him for 15 years is because I always say, you got it. I never argue and say, oh man, this is so wrong. He will ask me, what do you think of this? And I will tell him the truth. It's a very high paying gig. And last night I went to him at 7:50 and I said, they're not ready. I'm thinking 8:15. So let me do some slow and Motown, and 8:15-ish rolls around. He looks around, they're still chit-chatting. He goes, 8:30. I said, 8:30. Let's open with September by Earth, Wind and Fire. Sounds good. But I want Uptown Funk next. You got it. I didn't argue the mix. I just did it. 3 songs later, he comes running up to me. I got a full dance for him. He goes, have you played Uptown Funk yet? I did. Can you play it again? Of course I can. And I played it again. And they didn't care. This crowd is like 40 to 80. They just were having fun. But they petered out quickly. So at like 9:10, he's like, let's go back to Christmas. 9:25, play Donna Summer Last Dance. He's like, yes. Like, it's just, you have to know what your role is at that gig. You're talking about roller skating. I've never even been. I played hockey.
There he goes.
I skated forever. But I've never been to a roller rink. Michelle has. Like, they had them out here. If they had them in Boston, I didn't know about it.
Well, it was the closest thing that I could get to that at the time. It was just...
Well,
was there ice skating too?
I was quite the roller skater in my day. I could dance roller skate.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, see, that just never got on my radar because I would skate in the winter, but summertime, just for me personally, maybe.
The thing I hated most is when the light came up above the so-called DJ and it says
so-called, Brian. Make a note. So-called.
Well, at least where I was, they were just like, there would be gaps in between. It was just that, but my favorite was when it was couples only. I'd ask a girl to dance and I'm skating backwards and around her. And I would just,
otherwise you're holding hands with her. And that's kind of,
everybody else was holding hands going around in a circle.
You had to skate backwards. She's impressed by that.
I became the guy that they wanted. I hope he asked me to skate with him.
Well, imagine what it's like being 13 years old in that booth, seeing the girl and going ahead and just deciding it's couple skate time because you're close and you can jump over there and grab her real quick.
Nice.
So you're just playing God,
Yeah.
Because I was floor guarding the whole time too.
Yeah.
Howie, when you were skating backwards, would her toga, would the wind blow it up, or was that not a thing? Or
no, it just blew her skirt up a little bit,
So So we've talked about some of the origin stuff and all that. It did get better. It got more glamorous into my 20s.
Yes.
Because back then, I think it's important to mention that being a DJ wasn't necessarily the cool guy thing. There were a lot of things you could be doing that were a lot cooler than that. If you're playing in a band, that was a lot cooler. If you were a big city club DJ, if you were like in a major market DJing downtown somewhere, you were cool. But if you were doing a wedding reception or you were doing a Best Western executive and you weren't cool, but that's where I cut my teeth as a teen, and people made fun of me, people I knew, you're not a real DJ. That's not cool DJing. Today, that's fine. But, back then, there was stigma to it.
Yeah, a bit.
And a couple things I just wanted to throw out there for anybody who's curious about the old days. Most places that I worked where I wasn't doing mobile stuff, when I was doing club stuff or lounge stuff or whatever, there was a library there that they had. So they had whatever for music, whatever they felt like what they wanted to be played, they had it there. So I remember one place that I worked, they had New Order Substance 87. It was there. And they had Dead or Alive, You Spin Me Around. It was there. And they had, several things. But what made you interesting was what you brought. So you could play the in-house library. You could do that. It was there. And it was intuitive, but if you really wanted to be cool and stand out, you bring something new to the table that nobody else has. It's not in the library. The Friday night guy doesn't have it. You have it. So when you're there, you can play that track. That wasn't a thing back then.
Right.
And not only did it need to be unique, but good, but so that was a cool thing that's kind of missing these days. You just don't see that as much. The glamour stuff. Yep. When I was 21, I was working downtown at our real club, and I was there. The math is goofy with me. I'm thinking I was there for, I want to say 7 years, but it was probably closer to 6, like 6 solid years.
That's great.
It was a residency, and I had a following, and I knew all the other guys that worked the other clubs too. So, we would VIP each other into each other's clubs, and, we were all friendly. Nobody was cutthroat. Once you were down there, everybody was just cool, Cutthroat, those were for the suburb guys. Screw them.
Yeah.
The downtown guys, they were all cool with each other. Saw a lot of stuff.
You didn't go through the management days where a new manager meant all new DJs, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, the place that I worked, it's still there.
Yeah, Funhouse.
No, Safe House. The original owner passed away 2 years ago, I think. He opened it in 66, and he just passed away, and sold it to Marcus Corp, who owns like movie theater chains and hotel management groups and things.
Right.
So they're running it now. But at the time, the owner's nephew was running it. And today, the person who was the bartender and the person who was the bar back are managing the place. Same people. I know them.
Oh,
I could go in there today and talk to them.
That was the thing, at least out here, where new management meant all the DJs were gone because they would bring in their DJs. And then around late 90s, early 2000, it became the DJs that had been around for 5 or 10 years were falling away. And these new 21-year-old punks were showing up who would take $100 a night plus a bar tab.
The game I played from day one, the game I played from day one with any in-house residency, screw the management. I don't care about the management. I'm talking to the owner.
Yeah.
That was the game from day one. That was the game from skating rink to the first lounge I played to the first club I played. Yep. I went straight to the owner. The only exception to that rule was Safe House, because the owner was like this enigma that whatever. But
never saw.
I was in with his nephew. That was close enough.
Yeah,
so that was family. But I didn't mess with management. And in fact, there were a couple of times where management would get fired, new people would come in. I could tell you one story that's kind of cool. I was about 19, I guess. there'd been this guy who was managing this lounge that I was working at, this hotel. I got along with him okay, but not great. And he kind of looked like Johnny Rivers, the guy who did Secret Agent. Man, he kind of reminded me of him. Anyway, they used to bring in like blackjack tables for entertainment, not for real money, but you'd play for drinks and things.
Like casino nights.
Yeah,
Just
like a casino night, but just blackjack.
Yeah.
And they had this, they had a staff of blackjack dealers who would come in. It was like a side gig for them, kind of like a photo booth operator today, I guess, So maybe you'd have maybe 2 blackjack tables and you'd rotate these dealers. There was this blackjack dealer who was an immigrant from Poland. And he, I don't know. I don't know how old he was. It's hard for me to gauge that because I was so young. He looked old to me, had a gray beard, but he wasn't that old, I don't think. So he's like a nobody, right? He's bottom of the food chain. I'm higher than him as the DJ, right?
Right.
But I'm nice to all of these people, all of them.
Have to be.
His name was Wojtek. So Wojtek comes up to me one night and he says, "Can I ask a favor?" So what? He says, "Well, my son is getting married in Poland. So I'm going to Poland to my son's wedding." I'm like, "Oh, congratulations." He says, "Yeah, I have a problem. I need some Polish polka music. Do you have anything like that?" I'm like, "You know what? I do have some Polish polka music. I could loan you these records. You could take them over to Poland and play this at your son's wedding." He's like, "Oh, that'd be fantastic. Because we don't know where we're going to get this." No problem. So I give him a couple of records that will work for him. You got to, polkas are weird because some are Jewish, some are German, and that gets weird, right? Especially back then. Mm-hmm. So I give him stuff that's
in Howie's day, that would have been really kind of weird.
Yeah, right.
You just
so I give him what's appropriate. He goes to Poland. He comes back. He thanks me profusely. You're anything for you. Like, no problem, Wojtek. It was my pleasure. I hope your son had a great wedding. So, it was fantastic. 2 weeks later, the manager was fired kind of abruptly for some embezzlement stuff. And Wojtek was hired. Wojtek was hired as the manager, the blackjack dealer.
Oh, nice. Wow.
So now I could do no wrong.
You're in now, man.
Yeah, you're dead.
Oh, man.
So the moral to the story, I learned this at 19. The moral to the story is be nice to everybody.
Yes.
Don't go in there.
Door up.
Yep. Everyone. Be everyone's
the guy
friend.
That does the bathroom.
Everybody. From the bar back to the owner. Be cool. Yeah. Don't make enemies. Be cool with everybody.
Respectful and nice.
You never know. There's politics with this stuff.
Oh,
there was then, there is now. It's
on a Monday, the bartenders will go to entertainment and say to their manager at food and beverage, who's above everyone else, and they say, "How was the weekend?" "I don't know, sales were kind of off. That DJ's kind of shitty." And that's it. You're done. Because all they know is dollar signs. Yeah. Versus when I was at the club a few years ago at the casino on Saturdays, if I didn't have a wedding, I'd go do a 3.5 hour shift there. And I would get a Monday email back from the head of entertainment who would say, "Hey, just want to let you know, sound guys love you. You're the fastest setup DJ we have. They said you were plugged into their rig before they could get off stage and get to the soundboard." I'm like, "Oh, thank you very much." Because I set up my gear backstage and just put it on a table and plug in 2 XLR and I'm done. Already got the laptop out, this and that. Excuse me. The bartenders really appreciate you mentioning any drink specials or, "Hey, go check out, Howie and Cheryl, our 2 bartenders tonight, either side of the room, yada, yada, yada." Mm-hmm. Because again, I just like you said, Brian, everyone in the club will tell their boss how their night went, and every boss has the same agenda. They want smooth and they want to make money.
Jay, what you're mentioning, though, are all jobs that we have done on our way up.
I've mentioned this so many times. So, I call it Bensoning.
Yeah. So my final question before we put a fork in this is, would you change anything
No.
The only thing that I would change,
No.
I would change something. And it would just be a slight attitude adjustment, because you got to remember, I got into this early, real early. And I'm getting feedback from my peers, and I'm getting feedback from I'm observing what's happening. So you got to remember, guy, I was young, and I wasn't like getting cool points for a lot of this stuff as a teenage DJ. So I was looking at like the guy who owned the first multi-app that I worked for. He dressed weird, awkward, and his clothes weren't cool, and he was kind of dorky, It was kind of like a clown to me, And I was always trying to bring something a little more cool to the table, but in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, this guy's 30 years old. I have to find something else to do before I'm 30, because there's no way I'm going to become this guy.
Right.
In my mind, this was a short game. And I wasn't giving it the respect or the attention I should have been giving it, or taking it as seriously as I should have been taking it at the time. I don't like talking about myself a lot when it comes to this kind of stuff, but I'm really good at what I do. I've always been good at this. Like, this is my calling. This isn't something that I just do because it was interesting. I'm really good at this. That's why people keep asking me to do it. So it's a shame that I dismissed it like that. I shouldn't have done that. I should have known, hey, you don't have to be that guy. You can be your own guy. And
well, that's some good insight.
That's the only thing I would change is my attitude.
Good insight. All right. Well, listen, thank you both for sharing. And I hope you folks that are making comments and asking for things, keep asking in the comment section whenever this goes up. And with that, we will see you next week.